Hello, my name is Annette Bentley Smith. I am your self published children's book author of 12 books. And the purpose of this video is to read excerpts from each of those 12 books. But first, a little bit about myself. I'm married, I have two grown boys and one granddoll. And my boys and my granddaughter are the inspirations behind many of my books, along with special friends and family. I wrote my first book back in 1998, and I've been writing since then. Now, you can read a little bit more about me. I do have a bio on my website. That website is www.mrsanniebooks.com. That's www.mrsanniebooks.com. mrsanniebooks.com. And please subscribe when you get there so that I'll know you stopped by. All right? Now, let's get started with the reading of my books. Um, and they are in no special order. The first book is called The Best Sleepover in the Deep Blue Sea. Now, have you ever had a hard time falling asleep? That's exactly what happened to Chance, a very tiny noble knight who lived in a very large castle in the deep blue sea with his very tiny sister, Harmony. They were certain that if they had a sleepover and invited all of their friends, they would fall asleep without any trouble. Come join Harmony and Chance on their adventure in finding their ocean pals for a sleepover in the sea. See who they meet along the way. Once upon a time, there was a very tiny princess who lived in a very large castle under the sea. She lived on one side of the castle, and her brother, the very tiny noble knight, lived on the other side. Both Chance and Harmony were too afraid to go to sleep for fear of invaders. Let's have a sleepover, Harmony suggested. The tiny princess and the tiny noble knight decided to invite all of their friends over to the very large castle so that they could feel safe and get some sleep. Their friends were Pinky the whale, Gray Boy the dolphin, Octus the octopus, Lizzie the lizard, Sharky the shark, and King Greeny the frog. How will we tell them? We don't have a phone because a whale knocked down a power line, asks Chance, the tiny noble knight. We'll just have to go to each one and tell them about our sleepover, suggested Harmony, the tiny princess. They decided to wait until the next morning to get an early start. What will we do until then? Asked Chance, the tiny noble knight. Let's bake some cookies, pies, and cakes, the tiny princess suggested. And then what? Her brother asked. That's not going to take all night. We are inviting 6 friends over, explained the tiny princess. We can prepare 6 of our finest rooms in the castle so that each one will have his or her own room. So that's the best sleepover in the deep blue sea. Book number 2. To Nana with love from me. The little girl inside this book has 2 grandmothers. They are both called Nana. Look inside and read the letter she has written to them. How many grandmothers do you have? What do you call them? Perhaps you too can write them a letter to have for the rest of their lives. Now, this book is written in poetic form. Here's a story about me and two grandparents that I love. There's also a letter you must see. Read it with grandparents and people you love. They came closer as I lay in Mama's arms, one on the left and one on the right. They both had wide grins of charm. I wanted them to hold me all night. The one on the left held me first, then the one on the right. She gave me a bottle to quench my thirst, while the other one watched under bright lights. Who were they, I wondered, as I opened and shut my eyes. Just who were they, I pondered, as they both stood listening to my cries. I learned who they were as I began to grow, and I started to say my first words. Nana is our name, they wanted me to know. I have two Nanas. Is there a third? They both live in different homes. They both have to share me. I will never have to be alone, and they will love me unconditionally. Here's what I'd like to say to the both of you. I pray these words go a long way and last your whole life through. So that's to Nana, and you can see the number two. To Nana, with love from me. There's also a book that accompanies this one, and it is called To Granddad, with love from me. And the little girl inside this book has two granddads. Look inside and read the letter she has written to them. How many granddads do you have? What do you call them? Perhaps you too can write them a letter to have for the rest of their lives. Here's a story about me and two grandparents that I love. There's also a letter you must see. Show it to your grandparents and the people you love. One came closer as I lay in Mama's arms. He stood tall under the bright lights. He had a smile filled with charm. I wanted him to hold me all night. Time went by, then came another. It was love at first sight. One hand was rubbed, then the other. I was picked up gently and rocked just right. Who were they, I wondered, as I looked from left to right? Just who were they, I pondered, as I held onto their finger with all my might. I learned who they were as I began to grow and started to say my first words. I'm your granddad, they wanted me to know. I have two granddads. What in the world? They both lived in different homes. They will have to share me. I will never have to be alone, and they will love me unconditionally. Here's what I'd like to say. It's meant for the both of you. I pray these words go a long way and last your whole life through. So that's To, here again, the number two, because she has two granddads. To Granddad with love from me. All right, on to book number 4. It's called Divorce Through the Eyes of a Child. Dear Mama and Dad. And this book too is written in a poetic manner. Are you a child of divorced parents? Do you have a friend who comes from a broken family? Look inside and read this letter written to a mother and father. You will see how children like you or your friends express their feelings to their parents about divorce, their friendship, and how the separation of their parents make them feel. We used to be a family. Then you walked out the door angrily. Then 3 became 2, and that made me sad and blue. I wish I knew what went wrong. Your anger was as mean as King Kong. Was it something I said or did? Did you even want to have a kid? Your voices would rise as high as the sky. I didn't want to hear them. They made me cry. Then days would go by with no words said. What's wrong? I asked. There was silence instead. Oh my gosh, it must be my fault. Isn't that why you were mad and didn't talk? Your words were never kind about each other. It was always one bad word said after another. How and why did it get this way? Mama, why didn't you let Dad stay? Dad, didn't you love Mama so? Why did you have to let her go? Things were said and done in front of me, things that were not good for any child to see. I just want you both to be nice so that I won't be affected later in life. So that's Divorce Through the Eyes of a Child. Dear Mama and Dad. Book number 5. The Miserable Life of Tack, the Aluminum Can. Life for Tack, the aluminum soda can, had been hard, downright miserable. He sat on the desk of a psychologist day in and day out. He was tired of listening to everybody else tell their story. He had been popped, drained, smashed, bashed, and trashed. He decided to be the one on the couch this time to tell his story to Dr. Psych. This book will expand your imagination and encourage recycling. That's The Miserable Life of Tack, the Aluminum Can. While Dr. Sykes sat and waited for his next patient, Tack realized it was time to have a little therapy session himself. Dr. Sykes, Tack called out. Dr. Sykes looked around the office, but didn't see anyone. Down here. Dr. Sykes looked at the aluminum can sitting on his desk. My name is Tack. Dr. Sykes jumped up and locked the door. It just wouldn't look right for a psychologist to be talking to a can. What's the problem, Tack? My life, he sobbed. Tell me about it, he suggested. Tack shivered at the thought of having to recall his past. He gazed longingly out the window. Well, it all started when I was born from Mama Bauxite. I was formed, molded, shaped, filled with liquid, and stored on a shelf in the refrigerator at a store. I sat between my two awesome best friends, Max P and Fanta. One day, a small, scrawny little boy bolted into the store, yanked open the refrigerator, snatched me off the shelf, shook up my contents inside, and slammed me down on the counter. He shook me so hard, I felt as if I was going to blow right then and there. I actually had a dent on my bottom from being slammed down so hard. Suddenly, I was put inside a hot, stuffy plastic bag and then stored inside a cooler filled with chilling ice. After what seemed like hours, the little boy takes me out, thumps me several times, and pops my lid. That gave me a migraine for sure. Go on, Dr. Syke advised, sounding unsure for fear of being caught. All right, the next book. What color am I? This was my very first book that I wrote back in 1998, but it took a few years to get it properly illustrated. What color am I? Two best friends, Stefan and Aiden, decided to draw each other during art. When Aiden picks up a black crayon to color his friend Stefan's face, he gets angry. To him, the color black is what it literally looks like. Did Stefan misunderstand what Aiden was trying to say by coloring his face black? Did Aiden choose the right color? Miss Stella has something special for the boys to help them with their dilemma. What is it? This story will help children learn about and increase their awareness of different ethnic backgrounds and skin tones within a fun activity, drawing. What color are you? What color am I? That's a question Stefan asked his teacher one day after getting upset with one of his friends. On a cold, rainy Friday in a small town called Griffin, Stefan and his class had to stay indoors to play. There were several areas in the classroom that Stefan and his friends could choose to play in. They had the computer center where they could play different games and learn at the same time. Only two children were allowed on the computer at a time so that it wouldn't get broken and everyone could have a turn. In the next part of the classroom was the reading area. There were several bookcases with lots and lots of books to choose from. Large ones, small ones, fat ones, skinny ones, funny ones, and not so funny ones. A table was there too with headphones and books with CDs, just in case someone wanted to sit there to listen and follow along in the books. In another part of the room were the art and paint area. Stefan chose to play in the art area. He had to choose someone to play with him, so he chose his friend Aiden. The boys were best friends because they lived right next door to each other and always played together. Miss Stella, their first grade teacher, gave them a basket of crayons, construction paper, and markers to use. What do you want to draw? Stefan asked. I have an idea, Aiden shouted. Let's draw each other. That's a great idea, Miss Stella said, smiling. Here are two pencils. Draw the outline of yourselves first, like the head, arms, hands, legs, and feet. Don't forget to fill in the eyes, nose, ears, mouth, fingers, and toes. Then color your pictures last. Yes, ma'am, the boys said together. Miss Stella walked around the room to see what the other children were doing. While she was away, Stefan and Aiden started on their drawings. Suddenly, there was a scream. Ouch! Shouted one of the girls. Stop pulling her hair, Quinn. Finish up on the computer, she said scoldingly. Then there was another scream. No! Stefan shouted angrily. Don't use that color crayon on my face. Stefan snatched the black crayon from Aiden. I'm not black. Here, use this one. That's what color am I? Next, we have Would You Want to Be Me? This is written in a poetic form. About the book, would you like to know what it would be like to be us? We have wondered what it would be like to be you, too. There is some good and not so good to being us. By the end of the story, you may all be happy just to be you. Would you want to be me if you were a traffic light? You would help people stop and go, but would have to hang in the air all day and night. Would you want to be me if you were a road? You would help people get from one place to another, but would have to feel the heat of the sun and the winter's cold. Would you want to be me if you were a gas station, restaurant, or store? You would help people buy food, but would have them going in and out your doors. Would you want to be me if you were a light bulb inside a street light? You would help people on the streets to see, but would have to stay on every day and all night. So that's Would You Want to Be Me? Thanks for hanging in here with me. We have just a few more books to go. The next story is called Sam and Mel, a horse story. Winston Churchill was famously quoted as saying, "The outside of a horse is good for the inside of a man." All sorts of people, from little girls to old men, have been captivated by horses. As it turns out, horses are particularly good for children and have exceptional benefits for children with emotional or behavioral issues. Horse programming has many benefits for both children and adults. Horses readily give their hearts to their human partners and will take you for a ride that will change your life for the better. If you have a child, or if you're a child at heart, find a horse program near you and start riding. And that's from Psychology Today. Now, a bit about the book. Have you heard of Take a Child to Work Day? Well, Mel, a 5-year-old bright, smart, and caring little girl, went to work with her dad. She had no idea that she would fall in love with a horse named Sam. He was used to children. He was part of a special program to help them with emotional and behavioral problems. When Sam met Mel, they immediately discovered they were kindred spirits. They formed a bond so special that they were literally able to talk to each other. He helped her learn to behave, trust, talk about her feelings, and be responsible. One day, Mel went to visit Sam, but he was no longer there. What happened to him? Will Mel see Sam again? She began to cry, but her dad was able to soothe her fears and change them to cheers. It was an ordinary day for Sam the horse. He was brushed and groomed so children could ride. His back was strong, so he didn't mind, of course, because for children he had a special stride. Sam was unique and extra kind. He could sense the feelings of kids. Some of them were good, but a few of them whined. A few tried to pull his tail, which was something the owner forbids. Sam had big, beautiful hazel eyes. All horses generally do. His mane flew in the breeze as he glided through the grass covered by the morning dew. He had a caretaker who groomed him well. Over the years, they formed a special relationship. Sam responded to his gentle commands and never rebelled. The man was always kind and never ever used a horsewhip. Sam's caretaker had a little child named Mel. The girl often came to the barn to see him. Sam knew who it was by her hat and sweet, flowery smell. He loved resting his head on her hat brim. One cold day, Mel went to visit Sam at morning's first blush. She wore her favorite pink coat. She noticed Sam had a special pink finishing brush for his face, ears, and under his throat. Sam loved Mel's attention so much that he even let her braid his tail. And Mel loved and adored Sam so much. "If anyone hurts you, I'll get 'em," she yelled. Sam neighed and nodded his head. He picked up on how Mel felt. "I'm so happy you will," Sam said. Suddenly, Mel froze as she tightened the horse's saddle belt. That's Sam and Mel, a horse story. Next, we have shared love. Do you know what co-parenting means? Some children don't, but in this story, 6-year-old Lyric quickly learns what it means. Now that her parents live in separate homes, they must go to court to see whose home Lyric will live in. Follow along with Lyric to learn the meaning of co-parenting and how she deals with it. Lyric peeked through the crack of the courtroom doors. Pow! The gavel came down with a loud thud on the big brown desk. She wondered who she was going home with. She couldn't understand what was going on and what was being said. 6-year-old Lyric sat down on the bench in the hallway of the courthouse with a counselor named Jules. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked. Lyric nodded her head. "Oh, yes, ma'am." She leaned back on the bench and closed her eyes. Softly, she started singing a song she and her Nana often sang together. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray." Lyric stopped in the middle of the song, looked up at the counselor and said, "Miss Jules, my sky is gray." I'm sorry, Miss Jules replied. The sun will shine again. Like it used to when Daddy and Mama were happy? Lyric asked. It won't be quite the same, Miss Jules responded. Let's go across the street to the park, she suggested. Miss Jules stood up and walked toward the front doors. Lyric opened the door to the courtroom slightly. She saw her daddy sitting on the left side of the courtroom with his daddy and mama. Then she looked to the right and saw her mama sitting with her parents. Neither of her parents looked happy. Tears filled up in her pretty hazel eyes. She wanted to run to them and hug them. She wanted to reassure them that everything was going to be all right. Miss Jules looked back just in time to see Lyric put one foot in the door. Daddy, Mama, she called out in a whisper. The big, tall, old-looking judge with a head full of gray hair looked up from the papers he was writing on. Both her parents looked back in surprise. A security guard that was standing behind the door knelt and kindly said, You can't be in here, little one. Miss Jules grabbed her by the hand and gently led her outside. Lyric began to cry. It's my fault, she sobbed. Miss Jules and Lyric walked across the street to a park filled with flowers, trees, and families. They saw the perfect tree that offered plenty of shade and sat underneath it. Tears continued to soak Lyric's cheeks. The more she wiped them away, the more they flowed. Miss Jules handed Lyric a pretty pink handkerchief. Pink was Lyric's favorite color. It's not your fault, love. It's never a child's fault. Please know that, okay? That's shared love. 3 more books to go. This one, Naira's Bully. And of course, you see the bully X'd out because what do you think happened? Naira's friend. This book is dear to my heart. The worst thing to face in school is a bully. Naira and her sister Rain have to face this reality in their first year of elementary school. Brooklyn, a 5th grader, knows nothing else but to bully others, and Naira was her target. How long would she get away with it? Apparently, she didn't care. She felt that Naira deserved it. Would Brooklyn finally